Hello, hello. Welcome back to Two Dumbbell Blondes. I'm Lindsay.
And I'm Katie. Before we get started, just a reminder, if you are listening to us on your favorite podcast platform, please don't forget to follow and rate our show. If you are watching us on YouTube, please subscribe and like the show. So today we have Alex Yuzefovich on our show today. He's a licensed acupuncturist. I am going to turn it over to Lindsay to give a little intro, and then we are going to talk all things acupuncture.
Yes, good job with the last name there, Katie.
I did have to pause and make sure that I was saying it correctly, but
So hopefully you guys enjoy Alex as much as I do. I actually get to see him pretty much every other week. So I started working with Alex probably about 2 years ago or close to that. And I started seeking acupuncture for my menstrual cycle. We've maybe shared a little bit of this on previous episodes, but I have had an irregular cycle. So I've tried more holistic approaches to regulating that. And that is why I first met Alex and started working with him. And then through all of my hard training with rim to rim and other things that I've, had, he's done an awesome job with just body work and keeping me healthy. And I think his approach is different than what we think, in the gym. And it's more of an energy balance. And like I said, that holistic approach. So we are excited to have Alex here to talk a little bit about how he got into acupuncture, the different types of approaches, his philosophy, and he's just a joy. So I'm excited for everyone to learn from him today.
So welcome, Alex.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here.
Let's just start out by you giving us a brief overview of your background and what got you into acupuncture.
Okay. Yeah. So the start of my journey was actually when I was a kid and started practicing martial arts. And that kind of got me into the whole world of non-conventional approaches. That was when I was about like 9, 10 years old. Then was a long break, and many, many years later went back to practicing martial arts. And one of my teachers just reminded me, like, hey, there's like, I saw my instructor do some stuff and it's working with this meridian system, and you can do this for like combat purposes, so to speak, like martial arts purposes, or something for healing. And like clicked in my mind. It's like, oh wow, this is super interesting. I need to look into it. How come there's like this other, so to speak, supposedly other system that you can plug into and do all sorts of things in the body? So that opened a whole like mental door for me initially and got me very curious. And
So I
the
have a question, Alex. You
yeah,
said you
please.
started martial arts at 9 and then you came to this like, oh, there's something deeper here. Were you also 9 at that time or was this later in life?
Oh,
I was thinking
well,
that same question. I'm like mind blown that at 9 and 10 years old you were interested in this.
Yeah.
well, I saw this first, the pictures at 9 and 10, and I was like, wow, this is amazing. I want to understand it. But then at that time, I didn't have a lot of follow up on it. And the person I learned about it at a resort and doing a few classes with a friend's dad. So it just kind of stuck around in my mind. And then later, years later, uh, with a completely different instructor, regular classes, and it just like, oh
It
wow,
came back.
yeah,
Okay, and I have to also ask, you have an accent. Where are
I
you
do.
from?
Well, initially the USSR, born in Ukraine, and then when I was a teenager, my family immigrated to Israel with a whole bunch of other people leaving the USSR at the time. And this is where I did later my regular martial arts training, and where my instructor at the time sparked the interest.
Wow.
And I
Okay.
believe you
Yeah.
said, was it meridium system? Is that what you had said?
Meridian. Well, yes, Meridian is kind of Western name for how the Chinese essentially and the Japanese Eastern medicine describe what now mostly people call channels. So essentially, a connection between internal and external function. So
So
yeah,
when you
go
said
ahead.
when you saw images or graphs or whatnot, that's
Yeah.
what you were looking at.
Yes, I saw like old Chinese drawings of the flow through the body and the different points and the different organ connections. And it was like, wow, how is this even possible? And then now that's what I'm doing.
So, just in case our listeners, if there's someone out there that is
Yeah.
unfamiliar with acupuncture,
Yes.
will you explain a little bit about what that is? I want you to go in a little bit more to your background, but
Yeah.
just to state what
Yeah.
acupuncture is in case anyone out there is wondering.
So acupuncture is one way of affecting this flow, but essentially it's placing very, very fine, very gentle needles into spots on the body that could be along those channels in particular, or could be in between, just in soft tissue, depending on what's going on with the person and what's needed, what I'm seeing that's needs to be prioritized. And by doing that, you stimulate a change, a cascade of changes in the body that leads to improved function or reduced pain or better regulation of different organs and systems. And yeah, it's you can also do this by acupressure, just pressing on the spots. You can do it through meditation as well, though it takes a little bit more practice to and knowledge, a little bit more knowledge to even have the visuals to do that. Being able to visualize and plug into that as you
Wow.
do it.
Okay,
Hmm.
so you were in martial arts later in life and you came
Hmm.
back to this interest. And so then how did you start to really deep dive and learn about the channels and the body and how everything is connected?
Well, the martial arts was actually really, really good basis for me because you have a day. It's a physical practice, and it also includes stress. So you're actually under stress, and you have to regulate yourself as you breathe. You have to pay attention as you practice. You have to pay attention to movement and efficiency, and being able to stay present and not shrink into a little ball of fear. That's also a big deal, especially if there's somebody who's way more practiced and way more experienced than you are. So that was a very good intro to this because it does inform a lot of the treatments I'm doing nowadays. Being that stress in all sorts of forms is one of the main components of life.
Hmm.
And
So
yeah.
you got more interested in it just for you. What made you decide you wanted to do this as a career?
Yes, that's an excellent question. So for me, the turning point, the pivot point was being when I was a combat soldier at drafted as everyone in Israel is at 19 through, in my case, 22, and then doing reserve duty yearly. So during my second reserve duty service in 2002, I essentially eventually was diagnosed with PTSD at the time. But it was what I felt was just a very intense, overwhelming sense of stress all the time. So not just excuse me, not just during the service, but you come home and you have this ongoing kind of it colors your whole perception, colors your whole experience. And for me, I when someone said, you should try this guy who lived close by, and he's really good. I think you can really benefit. So I went, got a treatment, and suddenly felt like instead of weighing like if you've ever seen Monty Python movies with a 16-ton weight dropping on you, so instead of that, it just lifted. You
Wow.
just felt like a feather. It was incredible.
And it was immediate. After your first session, you could
It
feel
was completely immediate. Yes. During the session, I had like, as I was laying down, I was just seeing things move through my body and mind, and just kind of releasing,
wow.
letting go. And, and after that, like, so that was a really pivotal experience. And still at the time, many people in my immediate environment, family, friends, all sorts, circles, social circles that I shared this with, they would say, "Oh, that's awesome. But, if you want to study this, wait until you study like the real medicine, like, do real medicine. After you're done with real medicine, then you can go and do your voodoo, whatever you want to do, enjoy." So,
And you did not do that. You were like, the hell with you guys. I'm going to go right into this. And how soon after that did you
Yes.
start studying this? Well, I'm assuming
Pretty
maybe you
quickly,
didn't.
pretty quickly, within a few months.
You're like, I'll
Okay.
show
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it wasn't even that. I was like, okay, there's a lot of noise, and that was actually a really also formative experience to this day, because I try in each treatment help people clear noise. And so this was like, okay, it's everyone else's opinion. What do I really need? What do I really want? What's my alignment here? And this was it. That was it.
Wow.
Yeah. So
So
what
you,
brought you did you start, where you were growing up and then came to the US, or like at what point did you come over to the US?
To the US in 2015. My wife is from Minnesota. She grew up
Oh,
in the Twin Cities, and she had a huge spiritual experience at the Western Wall at the turn of the 2000s, and she moved to Israel on her own. We met. We lived on a it's a structure called a kibbutz. It's like a little community. In this case, was like about 2,000 people. It's like a small town. So, and I worked and like practiced in the community and outside. Like would drive to Tel Aviv for school and then for work too. So we met at a laundry, communal laundry, washing other people's dirty laundry, folding their sheets. Very romantic.
and the rest is history.
The rest
yeah.
is history. Yes. Well, and we decided in about 2014 that we want to try here, and my wife's family lives here, so she was also missing them a lot, and our kids were growing up without the family here, and we're like, okay, we need to do this. So
That's amazing.
yeah,
Well, and it brings you here. So
yeah.
let
Yes.
let me switch gears a little bit and ask you
Hmm.
about acupuncture as it pertains to women's health or just health in general. So
Yeah.
we do have a lot of women listening, but we also have some men that listen. So um, what specific health issues or conditions do you find acupuncture is beneficial in the women's health world or just generally speaking? Is there one that you specialize in? I know Lindsay saw you for her cycle.
Yeah, there are specializations in the world of acupuncture, Chinese medicine, and holistic health, but the view is a little different. You kind of work not from categorizing a disease or an illness. Of course, you take it into account, but you want to look at function and how is everything working coherently together. So then under that, if you're experiencing different symptoms, you might get different diagnoses for different things, but underneath there's going to be something common driving all of this. And so that's kind of the focus. So if you're having some female uh, irregularities, then addressing, yes, testing hormones is very important, and also assessing where are the different stressors in your life, because that also impacts hormones. Are you active enough? Too active? Nutrition, mindfulness, all these things, how they all play into what you're experiencing.
So, Alex, you said, we kind of just take the human as they are. We don't try to diagnose. We're just like taking in all the information. So, two things I know you almost always do when I come in, and you might want to explain why
Hmm.
you do them. So,
Yeah.
you feel the not necessarily the pulse, but like how the blood is flowing, and then
Hmm.
you always check my tongue. So,
Yes.
do you want to explain why you do both of those?
Yes, and it's not to embarrass people, though many do get embarrassed. Like, show me your tongue.
Yeah. I didn't brush my teeth.
I had
Yeah.
blueberries for breakfast, like whatever.
Yeah.
That's seen worse. So so the goal, it's interesting. So on the tongue side, it's actually very interesting to think about it. We don't normally think of this, but all the muscles, besides this being a common practice in acupuncture and Chinese medicine to assess through the tongue, if you think why, it's all the other muscles and internal structures are coated. They're covered with skin, fascia, all sorts of tissue. Here we have two muscles combined together, essentially working as one, with a base tied into the lower palate and to the cheeks. And you can see a lot of internal environment on the outside, which is quite amazing.
Hmm.
So you can see how your blood is flowing, how your muscles are being perfused. Is there like anywhere kind of a collapse, so to speak, or something stuck? And gives
Yeah.
you
So that's a lot on the under, right? Like
it's
when you
both under and the top.
okay. Okay.
Yeah. Under
Yeah.
shows you the veins, but essentially looking at the whole of the tongue, you can get a lot of information for the whole body.
That's fascinating.
It's a
Like
concept of oh, sorry.
what don't tell us all your secrets. I'm just kidding.
No,
We
no,
wouldn't
no.
be
It's
able to
okay.
figure it out. But what are certain things that you look for? Like what is something that you
Yeah.
might see that you think, "Oh, this is something that needs to be addressed."
Yes. Great question. So often, many people, especially those with a more sedentary lifestyle or more desk oriented lifestyle or needs for work, I mean, it is what it is. There's often a deeper purple underneath on the bottom part of the tongue, underneath the tongue. So there are two veins running through, two big veins. There's little ones too, and you can see essentially how uh, deep, so to speak, the problem is, or how pervasive it is through those veins. You can see a different discoloration. So let's say many people, especially when you're having a very stressful time, you often see the tongue become a little more purple, like a little purplish hue, and in many cases would also be reddish tip and around the tip. So that's
Hmm.
the tongue in that sense is part of what's called a microsystem. There's many microsystems through the body, like the scalp, which I was very good at in school. And
If you
always
guys can't,
volunteered.
yeah, if you guys can't see, Alex has no hair on his head.
Yes. And eyes, ears, tongue, pulse, abdomen, back. There's hands and feet. Many different ways where the body shows the entirety of the body in a small compartment. So
Mm.
then the tongue is one of them. So the tip of the tongue would kind of reflect more upper parts of the body, and the root of the tongue would be like lower body. So then you can see the dispersion of the different signs on there. So if you see that redness on the tip, usually people would have a hard time sleeping. Things are more inflamed, essentially. The body is more stuck. Things are not circulating as well. Detox is not working as well. The person is getting
Interesting.
more inflamed, and so the tongue gets a little more purple, less circulation. The veins underneath usually get purpler and thicker.
Hmm.
Um,
And what about your
yeah.
wrist? What do you feel for when you're
So
feeling Lindsay's wrist?
so the
To make sure
yes,
she's alive.
Yeah.
yes, that's always a good start, right?
I do fall asleep all the time in acupuncture, so it's questionable.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's checking the pulse. So there is importance to checking the pulse rate, like the heart rate, but it's also going beyond the heart rate and checking other. It's also a microsystem, so it does give me and any practitioner of acupuncture and Chinese medicine, for that matter, who practiced enough um, to feel the dispersion of flow throughout the body. So you can kind of get a good handle of how that's going. But I don't stop there. I check mobility and breathing and how other things are kind of coming together as a picture. I want to get as much information as I can to
Yeah.
help the best
I
way I
know you'll
can.
make comments like when you feel my wrist, it'll be like, oh, it's like an easier flow versus more like a disrupted
Yeah.
flow. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. Hmm. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you can tell from one session to the next. You can feel that just
You
by
Even
you
within
can
the session.
within the session, within pressing on the spot, sometimes within a conversation. If you're checking the pulse during the conversation, you can see a
wow.
change in the internal like tension or whatever internal change is happening, and the person goes, and you can feel the change in the pulse. And then you can, of course, after you put needles, I recheck to make sure I'm on the right track. And
Wow.
sometimes do the needles and then check mobility, or place the needles as the person is moving. I do that a lot too. So especially in like mobility related issues.
Yeah.
So when someone comes in or when Lindsay comes in, every time you meet with someone, it
Yeah.
is a different strategy with the needles based off of what you're feeling and seeing.
Well, I was going to chime in really quick.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I know when I meet with Alex, I kind of hit on three categories. So I hit on how am I mentally, how is my cycle, and then how am I physically? Because he is treating stuff too with like recovery of certain things. Like I know when I dislocated my shoulder, I literally text him that day because of all the people I work with, chiropractor, physical therapist, whatever, coach for training. He is someone that I always feel better when I walk away from. So I think the only thing he really treated that day I did it was just getting me to relax because your body's in this state of like guarding. And so everything was so tight and pulled forward that literally all he worked with me on was just breathing and relaxing and letting like this be okay and knowing like that connection of Lindsay, it's okay. Like you heard it, yes, but like we're going to get better.
Yes.
You said
It's a
mentally, physically, and
Cycle.
cycle.
Yeah, I tell him like where I'm at in my cycle, what symptoms relate to that cycle, and then he kind of treats or hands-on or with the needles based off what I'm telling him.
Wow.
yeah,
Fascinating.
yeah. And
So
yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, so Lindsay, in your experience, what have you seen? What changes have you seen?
So I kind of want to go back because it's funny because Alex said voodoo, right? And so I think a lot of people listening can think like, oh, whatever, it's this woo woo stuff. Like you're so hippie granola, whatever. I remember back to like 2016, I had a friend that was a chiropractor that also did acupuncture down in San Diego. And I had said to him that I was having symptoms with my menstrual cycle. And so he did an assessment, did a treatment, and I literally started my period the next day. And I think that's what kind of made me a believer in the first place. But then I didn't stay consistent with it. So as I've gotten older and now 36, I'm like, ooh, I probably should like get this figured out or at least get it more regular. So coming to him, it has gotten better. Now he hit on stress, right? And there's various like things that cause stress in our lives and it's managing those things. And so with harder training, it has been harder with my cycle, but with him, it is coming down. So it is more in like that 28 to 35 range is what we're trying to stick within. And it's gotten a little higher than that sometimes, but then it comes back down. So that's from a menstrual cycle side of things. And then from a physical side, like I said, anytime I see him versus anyone else, I immediately feel better. And I think it is so much of that connection of like the energy within the body, the mental meets the physical meets the different systems that he's talking about. And that is something I want you to hit on, Alex, because I feel like some people talk about going to acupuncture and they'll say, oh, I had this shoulder thing. And they had like 30 needles in their shoulder. But when I'm with you, I don't think you've ever put more than like 8 to 10 in me and it's in different spots. And so I think that is something to hit on because I don't know if that's a different style of acupuncture or where that comes from.
Yeah, that's a very interesting observation. So yeah, there's in acupuncture there's many different ways of there's a human being, right? There's a person, they have a body, and there's many different approaches to doing anything. So with acupuncture too, there's kind of minimalist approaches and more maximalist approaches, like trying to push and force it locally. But what I try to do is to see where things are stuck beyond the injury and try to get that involved and help the body regulate itself as much as possible and not to force it. Sometimes you need to, sometimes there's something really, really extreme and you do need that. Most of the time, you do not. It's more like connecting things together and letting the body do the work. So the approach when I studied initially in Israel, studied in a school of classical Chinese medicine, which is pre Maoist revolution in China. So before, or even like the big Western kind of influencer from the turn of the 20th century, where they were purging anything traditional. So many of the doctors at the time, over these decades, were and a lot of manuals and like texts were purged gradually, and many people escaped to survive and to continue their family traditions elsewhere. So there's quite a few Westerners that went and found those teachers in the East or met them in the West somewhere and started practicing a more actually like traditional pre revolution approaches. And those approaches are generally you try to diagnose and kind of define things, not diagnose in the Western sense, but understand the dynamic of what's going on. And yes, the Chinese medicine does have like different names for syndromes, but it's understanding dynamics of what's happening, define that, and treat more according to that versus trying to chase a symptom with more, you know, I'll
Mhm.
put 5 more needles, I'll put 10 more needles. So sometimes you need it, most of the time you don't.
Yeah, like I
What
know oh sorry, really quick. I know
Yeah.
like when I have stuff and you'll like assess like what's my range of motion, right?
Yeah.
Overhead. And then you'll push somewhere on my foot or my leg or
Yes.
something and then I have more mobility. And so it's
Yes.
like you said it's treating the like you try things first before you put in the needles and then it's like,
Yes.
"Oh, that worked and let's keep a needle there."
Yeah. So I have exactly. I have a picture of what's going on, and I want to confirm that what I'm about to do is actually going to yield results. You're not going to lay down there and nothing's going to happen, or sit and move and nothing's going to happen.
Mhm.
So, Alex, for a hip injury that I had a while ago, I did quite a bit of dry needling. What's the difference
Hmm.
between dry needling and acupuncture?
Dry needling is essentially very similar to what would be called, would be under the heading of trigger point acupuncture in Chinese medicine, with the difference that the focus is specifically, to my knowledge, breaking down muscle fibers and allowing inflammation to come in and create a healing response, so
Okay,
that the body can restore um, some of its function there. And it is usually more aggressive, and it often works. But what I see often, the missing part is that connectivity. So, do I need to go in now and break a bunch of tissue, or create a very painful reaction that's now going to create another site of injury? And can I achieve the same result or better by connecting things?
sure. So, dry
And this is
needling is
not
much
criticism.
more localized, and
Yeah.
acupuncture is looking at the whole, not just the
You,
hip per
yeah,
se,
yeah.
but
And
how everything else is connected.
yes. And I can add, and I do often add local points too, but I want to plug the shoulder back into the coherent whole. I don't want to just keep the shoulder there
Treat
with
just the
needles.
shoulder.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay, interesting.
So,
Yeah.
what are some, like, I know I've shared a lot of my personal experience with you and why I get treatments. What are some like major successes you've had or breakthroughs with clients from treatments?
So yeah, a lot of my inspiration initially and now too comes from helping people with, also on the mental side, like PTSD, anxiety, depression, all of that. That's a really big, like, it's close to me, and you know,
I was actually going to ask that next. So maybe take a minute just to talk about how acupuncture can work with mental health, just because it's such a topic that we're all talking about that we all
yeah,
need so badly. So
yes.
would love that.
So it's essentially, acupuncture helps regulate this connectivity and regulation. When I'm in a stress response, I am kind of not present in my body entirely. I'm all over the place, or I'm tightening into a little ball of infinite tightness, and and I don't perceive myself as my full self. I'm this little thing. So, and that colors how I respond to the world. That colors how I live my life. So then, allowing the body to open, if I'm contracting, allowing it to open up, if I'm all over the place, allowing it to center. um, so kind of going along those lines brings you back into the now, and allows your nervous system to regulate, which allows your hormones to regulate. And then if there's pain, that also usually gets better, and of course we can address the pain too. But that's a big deal. And with trauma, there's a lot of dissociation happening, because that experience is so painful to relive all the time. So I'm pulling back. So I'm kind of not really fully living within myself. So helping that reconnect gently, not to push, and also working with people taking conventional psychiatric medications and doing this at the same time. It works well together. It doesn't have to be either or. It's the goal is to help the person coming in heal, knowing that their body will always try to heal and work from that instead of pulling crutches or something like that. So,
Yeah.
So, how does someone start to incorporate this into their life?
um,
It-
basically, that brings me to what I kind of forgot to mention on the stress level and the all of that. There's something I've been using for a while with people, and Lindsay can attest to this. It's the bear to squirrel range of responses. Or maybe we didn't talk about it so much because she's way more on the. So what it means, it's a shortcut for accessing my stress response. Because usually in the moment, if I'm stressed, and I'm unable to regulate because I feel that something is threatening in that situation. I might not understand what it is, but my body goes into a hyper mode or into a frozen mode. Would be both, either fight or flight or freeze. They're
Mhm.
all
I f-
options.
I feel like the one that you've worked with more with me is like the metal versus like the
Yes,
wood versus yeah.
yes,
So if you want to go
yes.
through that analogy, I was like, I don't know the bear and the squirrel one.
Okay. So okay, cool. Well, I'll bring that up and then I'll touch on the other stuff. So the bear and the squirrel is essentially a shortcut that I kind of developed, so to speak, just started using to realizing where my nervous system's response is. Am I feeling under attack? Like, is a bear coming after me? Because this response is wired into us because of, nature, some disaster. There's an animal coming after me. So, is there a bear? So, it's like a quick, is there a bear attack? So, right, is this a bear? Essentially, in a shorter form, is this a bear? Probably not. Now, if it is a bear, by all means, yes. Recruit your body, let your body go into this response to its maximum you need it. 99.9% of the time, it's not a bear. 80% of the time, at least, it's a squirrel. And some of the rest is kind of like in between. You can use your animal imagination. But so it's just a very quick access tool to, is this a bear? No. Okay, I'm good. And then the next step is, can I breathe? So, and then my stress response starts regulating. In a job interview, is this a bear? Probably not. Is it stressful? Yeah, of course. Yep. But it's not a bear. I'm going to be
it's not.
okay.
It's not life or death,
It's not
Mhm.
life or death in any way.
right?
Mhm.
Yes.
And
So,
having the ability to ground yourself enough to ask yourself is step
yes,
one.
exactly. Exactly. Just need that little window to just, I'm okay. And then
Yeah.
once that happens, it's easier to make better decisions.
It's
Because
I
if
kind of
love
like
I'm,
that.
that. It's kind of like that question of, is this going to matter in 5 months, in 5 years? Like it's kind of like filtering it through that of
yes.
how big of a deal really is this?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's just a very quick access point of bear. Not a bear.
No,
I'm good.
squirrel.
Squirrel.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Squirrel.
Exactly.
So talk about what you've worked with me on. Like it, and I
Yes.
think this comes more from the like rigidness of like
So
we know I've had perfectionist tendencies, all that
yes.
stuff. So that think this is where this has come up.
Yes. So the language in Chinese medicine and acupuncture traditionally is a language from nature. Scientific method was a later developed thing, so they didn't have the a way to describe specific like atoms, molecules, whatnot, but they did see patterns in nature and structures and things that are very consistent. And so they describe them and they're cyclical. Everything's cyclical. Nothing's completely new. It all comes back. So um, the cycles of anything and the character of things they described in 5 phases. Some people call them elements, but it's essentially steps. Uh, water, wood, or tree, direct translation, but most people use wood, um, fire, earth, and metal, describing kind of a progression of growth and full expansion, and then starting to come back in and going back down. So kind of like when we look at nature and at the seasons, wood describes kind of more like a spring. Things are growing. Also, in the body could often correlates with movement, mobility, and vision. I'm looking forward and out. Fire is more full activity, everything's blooming, summer energy, all of that. Um, Earth is fruit coming together, like something like the process is bearing fruit and starts to get a material shape. Metal is it's really removing redundancies essentially. You can think of all of this also in like technical processes too. You have an idea, it grows, you get to processing, brainstorming, you get to a product, so to speak, you remove redundancies, that's the metal, and then you incorporate it into your system, into your memory, into your body, and that's water, and that's like the winter. You go inward versus outward. So metal is the season of fall too, and it aligns with so perfectionism in that sense. Perfectionism is um, very sharp. So metal is like sharpness, boundaries, clarity. It's not a negative thing. It's just a very powerful, very strong and sharp state of being. So how can we bring a softer, more fluid state of being with that? Using that metal, utilizing to bring a more fluid and softer way of being.
Oh,
Mm.
so that is fascinating. All of these things that we are um, learning. I'm going to use the bear and the squirrel a lot.
Yes.
I always ask, like in the workplace, if someone freaks out, I'm like, did someone die on the table? Are we
Yes.
really performing surgery? Is someone, no
Yeah,
one is
exactly.
dying.
Exactly.
Yeah, like it's going to be okay. So
Yes.
I love that, the bear and the squirrel. So going back to my original question, or my question around how someone incorporating this into their life, do you do it weekly? Do you do it biweekly? Is it bi-monthly? Can people see results if they come to see you one time, or an acupuncturist one time? How do you suggest someone start to do this? Um,
Yeah. Yes, that's a great question too. So there's no one size fits all. It depends on what the person's coming in with and who the person is. But one off is usually not a good idea. Even if you see results, they're not necessarily going to stick. You won't get a lasting effect. Sometimes, yes, there are those cases that you person comes in, you do one treatment, there's like magic happens. It does happen often, but then after a while, it does wear off, and the person needs to come back. Sometimes I had, some people like, okay, do one treatment, and then 5 years later, the person calls you back and is like, hey, you did this one treatment, and my asthma went away, and now I'm just starting to feel a little bit. So like, oh, okay, that's awesome. Let's work on this more. But that's not the majority of cases. So you kind of want to get into a routine of building up capacity in your body to stay there, like staying
okay.
power in that. So
Mhm.
um, if there's a big injury and you're really limited, sometimes starting off with twice a week, even 3 times a week, occasionally is necessary. Some people advocate for every day, and I know that in China they often do, in Japan too. Some cases, most cases that I see, most people that I see, usually 3 times is really the most. Then usually start with twice, then scale back to once, then scale back to every other week, and kind of spread it out. Some people do it faster. Some people do it slower. Some people start with once a week or once every other week if it's a cycle related, menstrual related problem. Usually, every other week is kind of along the flow of the cycle as we would want it to be, not as it is right now. So you're kind of helping the body align with that.
And are they 30-minute sessions, hour sessions?
Um, Normally, it varies. Needles can stay in between 20 to 40 minutes, depending on what's needed. And some treatments that would be unrealistic for most people because many people would go like, "Oh, what did I just pay for?" But you can do a minute treatment. You can do a 4 minute treatment. It
Okay.
depends on what it is. But
Yeah.
most people are like, what's going on?" No, I want the whole thing. So it's not very
Yeah.
practical usually.
So really, really just to start and to talk with the
Yeah.
practitioner and talk
And to
about
see,
what,
yeah, expectations and yeah.
yeah.
Mhm. I
Um,
know I started off with more and then had time like spacing in between, but then when I had injuries pop up, I would hit it harder too. So it kind of just depends
Yeah,
on like where you're at and what you
exactly.
need. Yeah. And I
Yeah,
think that's
exactly.
great too about the clinic you're at is you guys are very flexible and open and willing to help whenever you can. And
Mhm.
one side note of like the timing. So I think a benefit of acupuncture that is easily overlooked is we're so connected all the time, right? You always have your phone, you're
Yeah.
always connected. That is the 1 hour of my life where I don't have my phone and I'm not asleep, right? Because you think about sleeping, you don't have your phone, but I'm there for an hour and it's just me and my thoughts and laying
Yes.
on that table. And yes, sometimes I fall asleep because I'm really relaxed, but that's a overlooked benefit of just simply
Yeah.
being still.
Yes.
so much.
It's so true.
So,
So
Alex,
true.
what are the biggest misconceptions that you hear from people about acupuncture? Because I think that it's not well understood. And I love that
Yeah.
we're having you on and talking about it. I did it when I was pregnant and I have not done it since, which shame on me. But
Oh, no shame.
what are the misconceptions that you hear?
Um, well, that sometimes I hear that, look, can it really like do something physical? Like, can you actually like effective, have a physical effect on something? Or is it just, were you just like Lindsay was saying, the zoning out, which is very important too. Um, so that's one. Uh, it's not like, oh no, you can't do this without taking medication. That's another one. Or, oh no, you can't
What
do this
about, can we just take,
without
can we,
having surgery. Yeah.
oh, what about the needles? Because I
Yeah.
don't love needles and
Yeah. Yeah.
I understand I'm okay with it now, but at first I was like, there's no chance someone is putting needles in me. So
Yeah.
talk about the needles. Does it hurt? Do you feel it?
So most of the time it's pretty gentle. Sometimes there's zingers. In some people, I try to treat, actually acupuncture wise, I try to treat more gently, but sometimes you need a little more zingers too. Um,
Okay, what does that mean?
so you need to generate a little more sensation in the point to have a more like a traveling sensation through your limb or through whatever you're doing.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Mm,
normally, Alex will normally like kind of press on the spot he's gonna hit, and then he'll have me inhale and then exhale. He puts it in when I exhale. I would say 90% of the time there's no pain, and sometimes you don't even feel it at all. But
yes.
there are times where a zinger would be like if I have a spot in my foot, then I could like it's by my pinky toe. I can like feel it kind of go into my ankle, but it goes away. Like it like
Yeah,
happens
it
and
doesn't
then it
stay.
comes down. And if
Yeah.
anything does stay, he takes it out. Like he'll remove it. So it's very different than dry needling because dry needling is like pain the whole time normally, whereas
Yes.
acupuncture it's very like
Well,
relaxing.
and there
Uh,
are acupuncturists who treat very aggressively too, who
Yeah.
do like, you need to feel this and nothing's gonna change if I'm not digging a hole through your foot. So that's, it's an approach and it's okay and it works as well. It's just not for, the key is to find the person who is the right person for you.
and the needles are really small.
The needles are super gentle, and we also have what's called baby needles, which is not necessarily just for babies, but for people who are more sensitive with that. And they're silicone coated, and you feel them much less. And there's also non-needle approaches. There's magnets and laser and electricity and all sorts of like TENS units and ways of affecting change before needles. And some people, with kids for sure, there's a lot of like fear around it, but also with adults from early days or current days or whatever. And there's prioritizing, right? Like, what's my first priority? Can the person even receive treatment? So if they're too afraid to get needles, I can, jump through hoops. It's not gonna help. So then I'm going to prioritize first session. Let's do more like body work, a little bit related things, some mobility, magnets, maybe some TENS unit. Let's do this for a couple of sessions. See how you feel. See if you feel more comfortable getting needles then, not to like force you into getting this. And finding that spot where you're like, okay,
So
I
if
think
someone is very adverse to needles, they should still there are still benefits
ways.
and
Yes.
ways to treat that
Yes.
individual. Okay.
Yes,
Mhm.
yes, and there's
Mhm.
also herbal medicine and with nutrition and other ways of doing things. Yeah,
Oh, well,
Wow.
I know, like, every time I come to see Alex, I look forward to it. Like, I get excited
Lindsay
sometimes.
sings your praises, Alex. She like thinks that she's like, go see Alex. I'm like, I will, I will. I mean, she
Mhm.
loves you and what you've done for her. So
thank you. That's
Yes.
really
it's
nice of you.
yeah.
And Alex he's so passionate about what he does too. Like I know I've messaged him one off about a friend that I had that was having a lot of early pregnancy like sickness, and so just little holistic ways that she could treat that, and he's on top of it. Like he's just such a wealth of knowledge, and his whole mission is like to get people to feel better. And I
Yeah,
think
Mm.
you
exactly.
sharing your story of your PTSD and like it affected every part of your life. And so whether it be a mental thing, a physical thing, like you just want people to live a better life, and you know it's a journey, and you're just going to take that human being in front of you and treat them how they need to be treated, and it's not like you have this rigid plan with everybody. It's very
No,
open to interpretation.
yeah, it's open and trying to find us what's actually going on with that person and building a strategy that works for them,
Mhm.
not for their mom, their brother, sister, friends.
Yeah,
Yes.
for them. So,
Mhm.
Alex,
Yes.
I am sure we have many listeners who are interested in reaching out to you and potentially coming to see you. So, what is the best way for our listeners to reach you?
So currently, the two places that first of all, people would be welcome to follow the links that I'll provide. So that would be probably very helpful. And
We
yeah,
will put
and
those in the show notes.
Mhm.
yes,
So,
thank you. So I
yeah.
think that's probably the best way because just to
Okay.
follow that, and I'll be happy to get back to them and get back to you and help you
Mhm.
process what's the right fit.
Oh,
Mhm. And if you
so
guys
great.
aren't local to the cities, I'm sure just contacting Alex too, he could kind of give you some guidance on what to look for if you are seeking
Yeah,
someone in your
exactly.
area.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Be happy to.
Yeah. Awesome.
Oh, well,
Well,
thank you so much,
Thank you
Alex.
as well. This was really fun.
I feel like
Really
we could
amazing.
take like a couple topics you brought up and go deeper on them, but
Yes.
we got a little bit of a timeline.
Yes.
So but
Oh,
again, I appreciate everything that not only you do for me, Alex, but then even seeing the people that you work with, you know, in and out of your location, and just knowing that you are definitely making a difference.
Thank you
such a
so much.
difference.
Really appreciate it. Really, really
And
appreciate it.
we will definitely put your links and how to contact you in the show notes. You can reach us at Instagram, two dumbbell blondes, or two dumbbellblondes.com. That was hard. English is hard this morning.
The blonde
Oh,
kicked in. The
yeah.
blonde
Oh
kicked
my
in.
goodness
Yes.
gracious.
Oh.
Oh, well, thanks, you guys. We will talk to you next time.
Thank you.
Bye.